This is Research Like a Pro, episode 381, Love County Tax Records. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole and Diana Elder, accredited genealogist professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the authors of Research Like a Pro, a genealogist guide. With Robin Worthland, they also co-authored the companion volume, Research Like a Pro with DNA. Join Diana and Nicole as they discuss how to stay organized, make progress in their research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go! This episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Research Like a Pro.
Hi, Nicole. How's everything going today?
It's going well, and I've been having fun doing some locality research using ChatGPT and the deep research, and I recently did 2 research guides for counties in Arkansas that were burned that you've researched in before, Izard County and Fulton County, and my goal is just to see if I can find any more records on Sally Keaton and her children when they lived there, and my last project focused on Mississippi. So this project is just kind of focusing on Arkansas. And I gave it the prompt to, look at all these categories for records and find collections online, and then also consider offline collections and where those might be found. So my original cursory glance through the guides, they seemed pretty good, but now I'm going to actually dive into using them and comparing them with your Izard County guide and see if they are useful or not.
That will be so interesting. I'm really curious about that because I did do my guide, on my own, and I've researched a lot in that area. What are the years that you'll be researching, Sally?
She was in Fulton County in 1860 and then Izard County in 1870. And then she's buried in Izard County. And I'd like to know when she died. Her headstone was placed in the 1910s by descendants. And the headstone says after 1880 for her death, but I have not found her on the 1880 census. So I think it might have been a little before that.
So there is some record loss, but maybe that's late enough that you will have records, which would be exciting.
Yeah, we'll see. All of her children were married by then, so I'm not sure exactly what could be found. Some of the things I've already found are like federal level military records for that time period. And I don't know if anyone will be taxed. She had a couple sons there, so maybe we'll see.
Yeah, sounds good. That's great.
What about you?
Well, I am wrapping up my research on the Dillards of Cass County, Georgia, and went up to the Family Search Library yesterday to look at some county histories that were not online and just to see if I could glean a little bit more information about the area, and found a really nice one that was written by a gentleman who used it for his thesis, and he had written it all about the original town, Cassville. So I'm excited to dive into that and just learn more about the context. What I found are the 2 groups of people. I had 2 candidates for Cynthia Dillard Royson's father, and I'm finding that both of those people, I've identified both of those people, and their families are known. One is from South Carolina, the woman, and the man is from Tennessee, and they both have records that seem to show no hint of Cynthia. And she always said she was born in Georgia. So when I discovered that, they were from Tennessee and South Carolina, 2 separate families, that made me really question whether they could have a connection. So my next phase of this will be looking at all of the Georgian men who, and maybe women too, who got land lots in that land lottery of 1832 in that area. Because I do have a good solid list of Dillards, and maybe they didn't appear in a census. They are just there for that land lottery. Maybe she came up with their family. So anyway, I have another group to research in the future, even though this one is not panning out like I had maybe hoped. But that happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, that does happen, and it's good to rule it out and see what you can do with it, and then help you move on to the next avenue.
Yeah, it is. It's really good to rule things out. You may be disappointed that it's not what you thought, but you can just look at them and say, nope, not related, at least at this current point. Maybe way back in Virginia, they would be the same branch of the family, but not recently related.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens.
The ongoing search, right?
The ongoing search. Our next Research Like a Pro webinar is coming up. I'm excited for Melanie to share this. She's such an experienced researcher on our team, and qualified genealogist, which is a UK accreditation. She has a master's degree. She is going to be teaching about a case that she worked on that's Irish and DNA. And so all of our listeners out there who are interested in using DNA to help overcome Irish brick walls will want to watch this one. But this will be on October 21st at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And if you haven't registered yet for our Research Like a Pro webinar series, you can do so at any time this year, and you'll have access to all the previous webinars for the year and the upcoming ones. So the description of this is that Ellen Scott, an orphaned Irish American in 1860, had conflicting historical records about her origins and parents, Patrick Scott and Margaret Cox. Using autosomal DNA analysis, pedigree triangulation, and Gephi network graphs with ancestry DNA data, researchers identified her genetic networks and traced her maternal and paternal lines to specific U.S. and Irish localities, revealing candidates for both parents despite the lack of official records. So we're looking forward to that, and it will be great. The next study group is going to be our DNA study group, Research Like a Pro with DNA, and that will begin February of 2026. So if you are interested, put it on your calendar, and you can find the dates on our website, and registration will begin in December. And if you'd like to be a peer group leader, just email us or apply on our website. And make sure you are signed up for our weekly Monday newsletter so you can get notifications of all our new content. Upcoming conferences include the Texas State Genealogical Society Conference, November 7th through 8th, and I'll be teaching 2 classes in the pre-recorded classes. The first on cotton farming, using tax records to track economic status, and then my other lecture is AI and genealogy. And then Diana's lectures are about crafting focused narratives and uncovering female ancestry through cluster research and DNA.
All right, well, let's dive into our topic, which is all about the Love County Courthouse and tax records. So when Nicole was at Love County and doing some on-site research, we talked in our last episode all about the adventure of working in the deeds, which was so fun and interesting. And today we're going to talk all about the tax records. And the tax records are a lot different than working in the nice research room within the courthouse. The tax records are actually in the old jail out back. And I was just there a few weeks ago and had to do a little bit more tax research for Nicole, for our family, and so experienced the old jail myself. And so, yes, it is. It is an experience for sure. We had to be escorted in by one of the workers who had the key because everything was locked up. And I made sure I asked her, you're going to keep everything unlocked, right? I didn't want to be stuck in that old jail because it was kind of warm and it's kind of dirty with all the bugs on the floor. But it was an adventure, and the records are great. They're right there for you to go find.
Yeah, and when you went, it was even warmer. I think when I was there in May, it was just pleasant. It didn't seem hot at all. But when you were there, it was August or September, and it was a lot hotter. And so, with not a lot of air conditioning, that was probably hot.
Yeah, luckily we went first thing in the morning, which I'm really grateful for because it was getting warmer. But at one point I thought, okay, I just got to get out of here and get some fresh air.
Yes.
So it was funny.
Yeah, what was interesting when you said that, I was thinking about how the treasurer's office, the ladies in there said that the records had been stored somewhere else previously, but they moved them to the old jail because it was more climate controlled. So even though it didn't have a lot of air conditioning, it must have some, or maybe the thick cinder block walls keep out the elements better than wherever they were before.
Well, that could be. And yeah, that's interesting because we didn't have any air conditioning at the time, but maybe they have heat or something. Maybe it doesn't get as cold. I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. So this Love County research was part of my Kinship Determination Project, or KDP, for the Board for Certification of Genealogists, BCG certification. And while my KDP focused on proving kinship between 3 generations of the Harris family, I also hoped to add valuable economic context by tracking their tax records over the years. And this was really important for understanding Doc Harris's life story, the middle generation. And Doc lived through the Great Depression. And after leaving Love County in the 20s, he settled in the heart of the Dust Bowl region before eventually migrating to California. So I wanted to fully understand what happened economically throughout his life. And these Love County tax records represented a crucial early chapter in that larger economic story. The tax assessments would help me understand his financial starting point before the economic upheavals that would define much of his adult life. So I just wanted to start out with all the information I could. And he grew up in Love County, and that's where he started being taxed.
All right. Well, you had a clue, which was great, that would help your search. And that was a newspaper clipping from Friday, May 28th, 1920. This was the edition of the Marietta Monitor, and it showed personal property tax valuations by township, which is awesome. And the list revealed that Arza Harris, and this was John C. Harris's widow, and she was assessed $75 in personal property in Bernie Township. And Doc Harris had $480 in personal property in Washington Township. And then the next page of the newspaper also showed Hickory Township and Marietta Town as well. So that's interesting that that was made public knowledge, how much personal property apparently people had and were being taxed on. And so that newspaper did give you a lot of clues, and it would have been helpful if you'd analyzed this more thoroughly before your trip, but you learned it on the fly. So the list let you know that Love County was divided into those townships: Bernie, Washington, Hickory, and Marietta, which was just the town. And so it was organized differently than what you'd done before, which was the numerical township range system. So you went from doing that with the land, and now you had to kind of shift your mindset to go to townships. But the 1920 assessments did confirm that both Arza and Doc were still in Love County in 1920, and that also aligned with the federal census taken that year. So good job correlating all of that. And then the context of the amount was interesting because there's a big difference between Arza's $75 assessment and Doc's $480. So different economic circumstances, and Doc at this time appeared to be more prosperous. And then they were assessed in different townships, Bernie versus Washington. So they had moved into different areas of the county. So Arza was Doc's stepmother, and he's married by then, so it makes sense that he's moved out on his own. So one of the gaps in the timeline, though, that we had for Doc was knowing when he left Love County, because he's there in 1920, but in 1930, he's in Los Animas County, Colorado. And then the newspaper evidence suggests he spent some time in Lubbock County, Texas during the 1920s, because there's a 1922 article that mentions his son Bert Harris there. And in 1925, he served as the informant on his sister Devia Dove Harris's death certificate, also in Lubbock County. So, really knowing a little bit more about when he left Love County would have helped focus the tax research. But as so often happens, it's actually the tax records that eventually help you know when they left an area, combined with the newspapers. And so you had so much good evidence. I love it.
Yeah, I did. It was neat to have those newspaper articles. And it's always exciting to research people who lived in the early 1900s because there are often more mentions of your ancestors in the newspapers. And I never knew that I would be able to find them in the newspapers in this time frame, but it was so exciting to do that and to find so many things, and especially in both counties, in Love County and in Lubbock County, Texas, there were plenty of articles. It was just a matter of searching and mining the newspapers really carefully and searching for every mention of the name Harris, which is common. But then I found so many more times where the family was mentioned just under Uncle Harris or just some kind of like calling the family that you didn't know. I didn't know that John C. Harris was ever known by Johnny Harris, and that was fun. So anyway, the newspaper helped prepare for this a little bit. Well, in the morning, I had been in the county clerk's office looking at deeds, and after lunch, I returned to the courthouse and asked the treasurer about the tax records. And I was kind of tentative, nervously opening the door to the treasurer's office, but they were all really friendly and eager to help. And I learned that the historical tax books were stored in the old jail building behind the courthouse. And the deputy treasurer walked me over to what had once been the county jail and in the last 10 or 15 years had been converted into storage space for various county records. And it seemed to me as we walked by some of the other cells that there were other county records in there, probably from the court clerk and the deed office. Well, as we entered the old jail, I was really struck by the atmosphere. The building had really retained its institutional feeling with the cinder block walls painted white and the unmistakable sense that the space had once housed prisoners. And the treasurer unlocked the outer door with a key and then led me into the jail cells area, big hall. And so we eventually reached the storage room that was for the treasurers in that cell. And she unlocked the door, and I was just astounded to see so many old volumes lining the shelves holding tax record volumes spanning decades of Love County history. And the treasurer turned to leave, and I made sure she would leave the door unlocked. And it was just kind of dark in there, and I knew I'd be alone in there without a key. So I just felt a little nervous, like you said. But once I was alone, I took a moment to take in my surroundings, and I just love the look of the old volumes. They're so beautiful with the kind of dark gem colors, and they're a little bit dusty, but they were pretty.
Well, now let's have a word from our sponsor. Ever wondered what life was really like for your ancestors? With newspapers.com, you can explore the world they lived in through their eyes, in their time. Search over 1 billion newspaper pages dating from 1690 to 2025 and uncover the stories that shaped your family's past. From birth and wedding announcements to obituaries and community news, these pages hold the milestones and everyday moments that connect you to your roots. But it's more than names and dates. It's about standing in their shoes. Picture reading the local newspaper your great-grandmother once held, or stumbling on a forgotten article about your grandfather's first business. These aren't just clippings, they're pieces of your family story. Newspapers.com turns curiosity into connection. Start your journey today at newspapers.com, because sometimes the past isn't just history, it's a story waiting to be discovered. Come make infinite discoveries today on newspapers.com. Use promo code FamilyLocket for a 20% discount on your subscription. Well, back to the old jail. And one of the challenges that you had warned me about was the lack of workspace. So the county clerk's office had those nice angled reading stands, and the old jail didn't have anything. And so it was kind of cramped quarters, no table, no chairs. So you warned me, and so I did the same thing you did. Took one of the large plastic storage bins that just had a few things in it, carefully took those out, and then flipped it upside down. And then that became the makeshift tables, because you could kneel on the concrete floor. And it's not super comfortable, but at least it had got the books up off the floor and had a place where you could open them up, and then you could photograph them. And I think it's interesting that you had worn sandals, and then that was kind of hard on your feet when you were kneeling down, and you wish you'd had closed-toe shoes. So I took your advice and did do that. And you also had a problem because your phone battery was already partially drained from doing the deed work all morning, but you had a phone charger in your backpack and you found an outlet. But sadly, the charger didn't seem to work, and the outlet maybe wasn't functioning. Maybe they just didn't have electricity in that building going through, because I didn't need any lights and you didn't need any lights. It was daytime. So then you had to put your phone on battery saver mode and trying to keep the screen up. So that was kind of a distraction, I'm sure, worrying about your phone, because it would be sad not to be able to get the photographs. And back in the day, if you had something like that, you just relied on your pen and paper, taking down notes, copious notes, which would really take a lot more time.
Yes, I was bent on taking pictures of everything. So I just put it on battery saver. And then something I learned to never go on a research trip without an extra battery. So I since bought a really good extra battery that can charge my phone up all the way really quickly, and a cord so that it's just like the shape of my phone. It's like another phone kind of thing, but it's just a battery and you just plug into it. It's really nice. And I've used it several times on family outings, but not yet on a research trip. Okay, so when I started looking at the volumes on the shelves, I noticed that there were multiple volumes per year for the tax rolls. And there were actually other volumes there too, besides just tax rolls, but I was focused on the tax books. They had the year on the spine. It made sense given the newspaper list that I'd seen, but I hadn't really fully understood the system of separating the tax list by townships before I encountered it. So there were those separate tax books based on township. And then the preservation issues. So some of the volumes were wrapped in brown paper for protection, which meant I had to unwrap and rewrap them carefully, which I always felt bad, but it was also kind of like opening up a present, like what's going to be inside? It's so exciting. So others of the volumes had dead crickets scattered on the top of the books and just dust that had accumulated. One thing that was different is when I started perusing the volumes, the land tax records were organized by township and range, just like the deeds. But the personal property and poll tax records were arranged alphabetically by surname. And so this meant I had to kind of like remember the different organizational methods within the same research session. I wasn't sure if all the years were represented or not. It seemed like they were all on different shelves and they weren't in order. But I've since noticed, I took pictures of all the shelves. And so I went through that and looked for every year. And I think every year actually was represented. So at the time, I wasn't sure and probably would have been good to just try to find all the volumes first. I was kind of just like rushing the whole time, like, okay, what do I want to do? Well, here's 1908. Just do this one. so, and I didn't get to do every single volume. So there were just a lot of years to cover.
Well, and it was tricky because some of the volumes on the outside would say like 1920, but then when you opened it up on the inside, it was also like 1920, 1921, 1922. They kind of rolled them together, at least the ones that I was working in. So they had done a good job of trying to identify on the outside, writing on the paper, the years, but I still found that sometimes they combined years. And so that made it a little tricky as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the earlier ones that I was looking at didn't have that as much. There was one volume that was like a ferret tax volume that was combined, but most of them were, there would be like two for 1915, and one would be Washington and Marietta, and the other one would be Bernie and Hickory.
Yeah. Well, it would have been nice if they were just lined up on the shelf perfectly.
I know, I wish I could go back and just organize it for that.
Reorganize it. But they're so heavy. They are so heavy. So that would be a job to reorganize it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. You feel bad taking the paper off, but there's no other way to look at the books and then try to put that paper back on a little bit. So it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So you started working through the tax volumes, even though this was kind of challenging here, and you wanted to confirm the newspaper preparation. So there was a mystery. There was, the different townships. And so you'd searched Marietta and Washington for volume 1920, expecting to find D.H. Harris with his $480 personal property assessment that was shown in the newspaper, but he wasn't there. And you did find R.L. Harris, who was listed right next to D.H. Harris in the newspaper valuation, but no Doc Harris. So maybe he never actually paid his taxes that year, despite his personal property being officially valued and published. So working backward, 1916, you found some success. So in 1916, in that volume, you thought it should include both Doc and his father, John C. Harris, because John had died in 1918. And in the Bernie and Hickory Township tax roll on page 21, there they were, J.C. Harris and D.H. Harris of Pike, listed together along with Lee Harris of Leon, who was a stepbrother. So that's really exciting when you finally see their name on the paper.
Yes, it was exciting. And Pike was one of the locations that I knew they lived in based on all the other research and records that I had found. So seeing the initials might have been, oh no, like, could these be other people? But having them next to each other, J.C. Harris and his son, D.H. Harris, it didn't say son, but just knowing, I know that they're father son, and then seeing them next to each other and having them both be listed as being of Pike, it was so helpful. So it listed their residence. And so this was the personal property tax list. And so it was alphabetized and it didn't list their land. It just listed the place they lived, like the town, and then like how much they paid in taxes. So like they had to pay for the school district and various different things that were listed. So that was great. And it was really cool to see Lee Harris. He was a stepson of J.C. Harris, who just we didn't know that much about. And it was neat to see him there on the tax records. Well, after having that successful moment, I decided to try to be more thorough and just kind of start at the beginning. So the earliest records in Love County were from 1908, right after the state of Oklahoma was created from Indian Territory, and Chickasaw Nation is where Love County was created from. And so I found the oldest tax roll, and unlike the later years, this roll was not divided into multiple volumes by township. It was just one comprehensive volume covering all of Love County. And then within the volume, there were sections for each township. In the Bernie Township personal property section, it was alphabetized. I found D.H. Harris of Pike on page 53. And then 3 pages later, on page 56, I discovered J.C. Harris of Marietta. Interestingly, he was in the Bernie Township section, but it said he was of Marietta. And that was interesting. And then S.D. Harris of Jimtown. And I think that S.D. Harris is John's brother, Sam David Harris. So that was great to add another family connection. Then I just tried to keep tracking the family through the years. Well, actually, the next thing I wanted to do was find out when Doc left. So I decided to go to the end of the time frame, which was the 1920s. And so in 1919, in the Bernie and Hickory Townships roll, I found Mrs. Arza Harris of Leon, John's widow, on page 20, and D.H. Harris of Bernieville on page 24. And this showed both John's widow and son were still in the county a year after John's death, which was in 1918, as I had expected because they were there in the 1920 census. Then I went to the 1921 book, and I thought maybe I would see if Doc was still there or if he was gone. I searched the Marietta and Washington roll, but couldn't find either Arza or Doc. I now realize that Arza would not be in that township, but rather the Bernie Township because she lived in Leon. But at the time, I didn't fully understand the volumes being in those two townships and that I needed to find both of them because they weren't together. However, Doc Harris lived in Washington Township during the 1920 census, so his absence from the roll suggested that he had moved in 1920, right after the census, or that he could have been assessed in a different township that year. And then in 1922, in the Bernie and Hickory Townships, I found Lee Harris and T.J. Harris, both stepbrothers of Doc. So the extended family remained in Love County even as Doc Harris had moved away.
Well, in the 1920 second volume of the tax roll, you found some good information. And this is such a good lesson that if you can't find your person, look around. Maybe maybe there's something else, some more information. So in this one, you had not found Doc on the personal property list, which also had J.D. Harris, Lee Harris, S.D. Harris, T.J. Harris, all those Harrises. They were all in Leon. You found Arza, and in the land tax section of Bernie, she was paying taxes on property described as 8 1/3 acres in Northeast, Northwest, Section 8, Township 7S, South, Range 1 West, School District 10. And this was valued at $285. And she'd paid her taxes on December 14th, 1920. So this was probably the same 8.75 acre property, less 1.25 acres for Pike that John C. Harris had purchased from E.L. Carlisle in 1916. And you had found that in the deed records that morning. So that's fun that you were looking at the deeds and then the tax records to see them paying taxes on that same land and, just tracking these people. It's just fun, isn't it, to just find all these little details about their lives.
Right, it was. And by this point, I was finally starting to put together that there were 2 volumes for every year. And so it was good that I found both of the 1920 volumes so I could be sure the Doc wasn't there in either of the 2 volumes. He wasn't anywhere in the county that year, which was so mystifying that he had been in the newspaper that year, but I think he just I think that the newspaper was just giving the valuation, and then he moved away and didn't pay his taxes because he didn't live there anymore. So I'm not sure how that works as far as the law, if someone moves away, like if they're still liable to pay or what, but he must not have paid, and they must not have written it down in the tax volume at all, because sometimes people were listed in the tax volume, but then they were listed as not paying and they were listed as delinquent. And so, but it was interesting that he wasn't there at all.
Yeah, that is. It would be really good to know the specific steps. Like first you are appraised or they ask you about how much you're supposed to pay. Who decided how much you had to pay? Was there an appraiser that went out and said, this is how much you have to pay for taxes? And then it's put in the newspaper and then you actually pay. It'd be really great to research that and learn that real procedure that they had to go through. That would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Yeah. When I researched that for a North Carolina project, they asked the people to come and report how much their property was worth. So it was kind of self reporting, which is probably how they did it here too. And I think that's how we do it today. But then you have to worry about being audited if you don't.
Yeah, and maybe they publish it in the newspapers so that people could come in and say, no, he has more property than that. If you're self-reporting, it's a way to make it more transparent because your neighbors know how much you have. It's a small area. Everybody knows everybody else.
Maybe. Well, I know they were trying in the early part of the county too. They would send a person out, the tax ferret, and they had the tax ferret roll where they had found additional properties that people needed to be assessed for, you
Oh,
know.
that's a great term. That is so funny.
Yeah, the tax ferret.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I had no idea what that book was for, but I did get it out and look through it and figured it out later.
Hmm.
And John
Interesting.
C. Harris was ferreted out in that volume.
Really? Oh gosh, that's funny. Oh, I guess people don't change. Nobody wants to pay taxes, or
Well,
more
I
than
think
you have
at the
to.
beginning of the county, they were trying to really get people to pay. And they had just been living in a territory that was kind of like, a little more loosey-goosey, a little somewhat lawless in some ways, at least from the historical context research that I did. They were the federal agencies and courts and things were trying to bring some order into the territory. So I don't think people were used to paying many taxes. And so they had to really crack down on that in the first few years of the statehood.
Yeah, that makes sense because under Indian territory, they couldn't own land. They just leased land and they wouldn't be paying taxes on that. So this was a new system. So
Right.
yeah, under the tribal leadership, there in Chickasaw Nation, I don't know if the tribes, were collecting taxes from any of the white settlers. Interesting.
There were certain taxes for like particular licenses that people wanted to do, or like whatever their, if they wanted to start a certain establishment, and there were all kinds of different licenses they did in those early records when I looked into the Chickasaw Nation records and stuff. But the federal level, I don't think they had like a federal level tax at that time, but I guess that's something I should look into to find out
Yeah,
if they
and
had like taxation in the territory.
yeah, that would be interesting. Well, we haven't found any records showing that, in what we've looked at. So that would be a good thing to discover.
Yeah. Well, as I was looking through all the volumes there, I began to understand the systematic organization. The 1920 volumes had helpful little section tabs, which was fun. The other ones didn't. But volume 2 included Bernie Lands tab, then a tab for Leon Lots and Bernieville Lands, and similar geographic divisions. So when it says lots, I now understand that that means the town lots. So instead of township and range land descriptions, it has like lot 1 of block 63 because they created a town and divided the land into lots. And then when it says lands, then that's kind of what you would normally expect for the land description to be, township 7 south, 1 west, section 26, the northeast quarter. So that was the lands. So when it said Bernieville lands, I knew it was that. So that was helpful to see those tabs in the 1920 volume. And then the other 1920 volume, covering different areas, had tabs for Marietta City. So in Marietta City, they had the town lots. And then Washington Lands, which was the overarching township that Marietta City was in. But if you were outside of the city limits, then you would have a land description that was under the Washington Lands. And then Thackerville lots, so town lots within the town of Thackerville. So understanding all that helped me navigate more efficiently as I continued my research.
Well, that's great. You just had to get the lay of the land, understand the records. Just like we do with digital records, we have to understand what we're looking at. So physical records, no different. So, well, as your research in the old jail wound down, you took photographs of all the bookshelves, and you can go look at the blog post Nicole wrote about this and see the pictures. It's fun to see all the different volumes and how they're arranged on the shelves in the old jail. So you were coming back one more day, and so you want to be able to look at your pictures and make sure you had everything that you wanted. So I think that's such a great tip, to really photograph all the books just to get an inventory of what's there. And the pictures helped you because when you were giving me a research plan, going back to the tax, do some tax research on things you hadn't been able to look at, you could look and see exactly what was there and what I needed to look at. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, I just wanted to look and see, like, okay, which volumes are the most crucial ones to look at in my next day, because I kind of had a feeling that I wouldn't have time to look at every single one. And so, although that would be my preference, I knew I needed to also go to the Historical Society Museum, and I really wanted to go there. So I needed to prioritize that. So I wanted to just make a list of which volumes were a priority and put them in order, just like I would do with any research plan that I was making at home on my computer.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thanks everyone for listening today. I hope you got some great ideas for when you go to research in old tax volumes at the courthouse or in an archive somewhere. It was a joy and a delight, and I hope you get the chance to do something similar someday soon. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your research. If you want to learn more, purchase our books, Research Like a Pro and Research Like a Pro with DNA on Amazon.com and other booksellers. You can also register for our online courses or study groups of the same names. Learn more at familylocket.com/services. To share your progress and ask questions, join our private Facebook group by sending us your book receipt or joining our courses. To get updates in your email inbox each Monday, subscribe to our newsletter at familylocket.com/newsletter. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We read each review and are so thankful for them. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.